on, and nobody could hear, and Small Porges was so very small, and who could resist the entreaty in his big, wistful eyes? Surely not Anthea. Therefore, with a sudden gesture of abandonment, she leaned forward in his embrace, and rested her weary head against his manly, small shoulder.
"Yes," she whispered. "Just as much as you like Mr. Cassilis?"
He whispered back,
"Yes." "A bit more? Just a teeny bit more?" "Yes." "A lot more, lots and lots, oceans more?" "Yes."
The word was spoken, and having uttered it, Anthea grew suddenly hot with shame, and mightily angry with herself, and would, straightway have given the world to have it unsaid, the more so, as she felt Small Porges' clasp tighten joyfully, and, looking up, fancied she read something like triumph in his look. She drew away from him, rather hastily, and rose to her feet. "Come," said she, speaking now in a vastly different tone, "it must be getting very late."
"Yes, I s'pecks it'll soon be 9 o'clock now," he nodded.
"Then you ought to be in bed, fast asleep, instead of talking such nonsense out here, so come along, at once, sir."
"But can't I stay up just a little while? You see "
"No."
"You see, it's just a magnificent night, it feels as though things might happen."
"Don't be so silly."
"Well, but it does, you know."
"What do you mean, what things?"
"Well, it feels gnomy to me. I s'pecks there's lots of elves about, hidden in the shadows, you know, and peeping at us."
"There aren't any elves, or gnomes," said Anthea, petulantly, for she was still furiously angry with herself.
"But my Uncle Porges told me "
"Oh!" cried Anthea, stamping her foot suddenly, "can't you talk of any one, or anything, but him? I'm tired to death of him and his very name."
"But I thought you liked him an awful lot, and
" "Well, I don't."
"But you said "
"Never mind what I said, it's time you were in bed, asleep, so come along, at once, sir." So they went on through the orchard together, very silently, for Small Porges was inclined to be indignant, but much more inclined to be hurt. Thus they had not gone so very far, when he spoke, in a voice that he would have described as quivery.
"Don't you think that you're just the teeniest bit cruel to me, Auntie Anthea?" he enquired, wistfully, "after I prayed and prayed till I found a fortune for you? Don't you, please?"
Surely Anthea was a creature of moods, to night, for, even while he spoke, she stopped, and turned, and fell on her knees and caught him in her arms, kissing him many times. "Yes, yes, dear, I'm hateful to you, horrid to you, but I don't mean to be, there, forgive me."
"Oh, it's all right again now, Auntie Anthea, thank you. I only thought you were just a bit hard, 'cause it is such a magnificent night, isn't it?"
"Yes, dear, and perhaps there are gnomes and pixies about. Anyhow, we can pretend there are, if you like, as we used to."
"Oh, will you? That would be fine. Then please, may I go with you as far as the brook? We'll wander, you know. I've never wandered with you in the moonlight, and I do love to hear the brook talking to itself, so will you wander just this once?"
"Well," said Anthea, hesitating, "it's very late."
"Nearly 9 o'clock, yes, but oh, please don't forget that I found a fortune for you."
"Very well," she smiled, "just this once." Now as they went together, hand in hand through the moonlight, Small Porges talked very fast, and very much at random, while his eyes, bright and eager, glanced expectantly towards every patch of shadow, doubtless in search of gnomes and pixies. But Anthea saw nothing of this, heard nothing of the suppressed excitement in his voice, for she was thinking that by now, Mr. Cassilis had read her letter, that he might, even then, be on his way to Dapplemere. She even fancied, once or twice, that she could hear the gallop of his horse's hoofs, and, when he came, he would want to kiss her.
"Why do you shiver so, Auntie Anthea, are you cold?"
"No, dear."
"Well then, why are you so quiet to me? I've asked you a question 3 times."
"Oh, have you, dear? I was thinking. What was the question?"
"I was asking you if you would be awful' frightened s'posing we did find a pixie, or a gnome, in the shadows, and would you be so very awfully frightened if a gnome, a great big one, you know, came jumping out, and ran off with you? Should you?"
"No," said Anthea, with another shiver, "no, dear, I think I should be rather glad of it."
"Should you, Auntie? I'm so awful' glad you wouldn't be frightened. A course I don't suppose there are gnomes, I mean great big ones, really, you know, but there might be on a magnificent night like this. If you shiver again, Auntie, you'll have to take my coat. I thought I heard a horse galloping. Hush!"
They had reached the stile, by now, the stile with the crooked, lurking nail, and she leaned there a while to listen.
"I'm sure I heard something, away there, on the road." "I don't," said Small Porges, stoutly, "so take my hand, please, and let me 'sist you over the stile."
So they crossed the stile, and, presently, came to the brook that was the most impertinent brook in the world. And here, upon the little rustic bridge, they stopped to look down at the sparkle of the water, and to listen to its merry voice. Yes, indeed, to night it was as impertinent as ever, laughing and chuckling to itself among the hollows, and whispering scandalously in the shadows. It seemed to Anthea that it was laughing at her, mocking and taunting her with the future. And now, amid the laughter, were sobs, and tearful murmurs, and now, again, it seemed to be the prophetic voice of old Nannie: "By force you shall be wooed, and by force you shall be wed, and there is no man strong enough to do it, but him as bears the Tiger Mark upon him." The Tiger Mark! Alas! how very far from the truth were poor, old Nannie's dreams! After all, the dreams which Anthea had very nearly believed in, once or twice. How foolish it had all been! And yet, even now Anthea had been leaning over the gurgling waters while all this passed through her mind, but now she started at the sound of a heavy footfall on the planking of the bridge behind her, and, in that same moment, she was encircled by a powerful arm, caught up in a strong embrace, swung from her feet, and borne away through the shadows of the little copse. It was very dark in the wood, but she knew, instinctively, whose arms these were that held her so close, and carried her so easily, away through the shadows of the wood, away from the haunting, hopeless dread of the future from which there had seemed no chance, or hope of escape. And, knowing all this, she made no struggle, and uttered no word. And now the trees thinned out, and from under her lashes she saw the face above her, the thick, black brows drawn together, the close set of the lips, the grim prominence of the strong, square chin. And now they were in the road, and now he lifted her into an automobile, had sprung in beside her, and they were off, gliding swift, and ever swifter under the shadows of the trees. And still neither spoke, nor looked at each other, only she leaned away from him, against the cushions, while he kept his frowning eyes fixed upon the road ahead. And ever the great car flew onward faster and faster, yet not so fast as the beating of her heart, wherein shame, and anger, and fear, and another feeling strove and fought for mastery. But at last, finding him so silent, and impassive, she must needs steal a look at him, beneath her lashes. He wore no hat, and as she looked upon him, with his yellow hair, his length of limb, and his massive shoulders, he might have been some fierce Viking, and she his captive, taken by strength of arm, borne away by force. By force! And hereupon, as the car hummed over the smooth road, it seemed to find a voice, a subtle, mocking voice very like the voice of the brook, that murmured to her over and over again: "By force you shall be wooed, and by force you shall be wed." The very trees whispered it as they passed, and her heart throbbed in time to it. "By force ye shall be wooed, and by force ye shall be wed." So she leaned as far from him as she might, watching him with frightened eyes while he frowned ever upon the road in front, and the car rocked and swayed with their going, as they whirled onward through the moonlight, and through the shadow